He said it without a tremor, like he was announcing the weather. "You're not worthy of being my wife. I'll find someone better." 4 years of my life, erased in a single sentence. And the strangest part? I laughed. I didn't sob. I didn't beg. I didn't even shout. Laughter just tore out of me, jagged and raw, because the absurdity of it all crashed over me at once. This man I had bent myself into knots to please, was looking me in the eyes and calling me unworthy. Now, his new girlfriend has already married someone else, and he's crawling back, flooding my phone with pathetic apologies that my husband reads with raised eyebrows and a crooked smile. Justice, I suppose, sometimes writes its own punchlines. But let me rewind. Christopher and I were together just over 4 years. The first 2 felt like something out of a soft focus movie montage. After 18 months, we moved into a tiny apartment with squeaky floors and mismatched furniture, and I thought it was perfect. My parents frowned at the decision. Too soon, they said, but I didn't care. It was the 21st century. People lived their own timelines. We were inseparable. We devoured the same shows in marathon sessions, swapped half-finished novels, hunted down hole-in-the-wall restaurants like it was a sport. He had a way of surprising me with little gestures. Coffee waiting by the bed before I opened my eyes. A link to a TikTok that reminded him of me sent in the middle of a workday. Nothing extravagant, nothing cinematic. Just small threads of tenderness that stitched me into the belief that I had finally found my person. When he proposed on our 3rd anniversary, down by the lake where we'd had our first date, I felt like the world had cracked open with light. The ring wasn't extravagant, modest, simple, but it didn't matter. It was perfect. I snapped the obligatory Instagram photo, called my mother in a flood of tears, and immediately began sketching out wedding plans. I thought we were unstoppable. But then the edges began to fray. 6 months into our engagement, the first comment slipped in, sharp, disguised as casual observations. "That dress would look better if you toned up a little. Maybe you should try a more sophisticated hairstyle." I laughed them off at first. A joke, surely. Except the jokes multiplied. Soon, it wasn't just my appearance. It was my ambitions, my intellect, my family. At dinners with his friends, he'd challenge my opinions, mock my answers with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Once, he suggested I should elevate myself if I wanted to be taken seriously as his wife. His wife, as though it were a role I had to audition for. I wish I could tell you I fought back. Instead, I folded. I believed him. I changed my hair, bought new clothes, stayed late at work, even signed up for online courses just to seem more cultured. I twisted myself smaller and sharper, like origami, desperate to fit the shape he demanded. Looking back now, the shame burns. But when you love someone, when you're desperate to keep them, you don't always notice when affection curdles into poison. The breaking point came 3 months before the wedding. We were finalising details, and he let slip a comment about my dress, one he hadn't even seen. He told me his mother was worried I'd pick something expected, something too plain, not classy enough. I asked him what that meant. And then he detonated. He ranted about how he had been settling, how I wasn't wife material for someone like him, how his family doubted I could represent him properly in their social circles. Then came the words that would scar and free me all at once. "You're not worthy of being my wife. I can find someone better." 4 years, reduced to that. I stared at him, stunned, and then, against all reason, I laughed. It wasn't intentional. It rose up from some deep, feral place in me, the realization breaking open like glass shattering. He blinked, thrown off, anger flickering in his eyes. "What's so funny?" he snapped. I shook my head. My voice was steady when I answered. "You're right. We shouldn't get married. But not because I'm unworthy, because I finally understand I deserve more than this, more than you. I stood, grabbed my purse, and walked out. The apartment door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. I went straight to my best friend Sarah's place. Only later, curled on her couch, did the tears come. 4 years of devotion dissolving into grief. And yet, beneath the heartbreak, there was something else. A strange, exhilarating relief, as though I had been trudging under a heavy pack for years and at last had set it down. Christopher's silence didn't last long. Within hours of me leaving, my phone began to buzz relentlessly. First came the fury. You're being dramatic, you're overreacting, you'll regret this. Then the whiplash apologies. I didn't mean it, I'm just stressed about the wedding. You know I love you. Finally, the condescension, dripping through every word. You're throwing everything away. You'll never find someone else who'll love you like I do. It was a cycle I'd come to recognize. Attack, retract, belittle. And this time, I refused to dance to it. I stayed with Sarah for 2 weeks while untangling myself from the disaster of a cancelled wedding. If anyone reading this has doubts, wedding insurance is worth every cent. Vendors needed calls, gifts needed returning, guests needed to be told. Each task felt like lifting bricks out of wet cement, but my friends surrounded me like scaffolding, holding me up when I wobbled. My parents were supportive too, though I caught my mother's eyes flickering with that particular dread only small-town gossip can inspire. The hardest part came when I had to go back for my things. I timed it carefully, certain he'd be at work, but fate wasn't that kind. Halfway through packing boxes, the door swung open. He stood there, pale, tight-jawed, and switched tactics like a desperate salesman, begging one moment. We can fix this. Just give me a chance. Cold the next. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. When I didn't crumble, he spat out, good luck finding someone else at your age. 29, as if I were ancient and expired, a carton of milk left too long in the fridge. What cut deepest wasn't the cruelty. It was the absence of love. Not once did he say he missed me. Not once did he say he couldn't imagine his life without me. Instead, he muttered about appearances, about his family, about how humiliating this would look. Everyone will be talking. My family already told everyone about the wedding. He was mourning reputation, not me. That was the final confirmation I needed. Walking away was survival, not weakness. I found a tiny apartment across town with sun-streaked windows and peeling paint, and it became the first space in years that felt like mine. I decorated shamelessly, watched whatever shows I wanted without his commentary, and ate cereal for dinner without judgment. The first weeks were brutal. I'd wake reaching for him in the dark, or stop mid-sentence because I'd remembered something funny I wanted to share. But slowly, a strange joy crept in. I was rediscovering the girl I'd misplaced while trying to become the woman he wanted. I picked up hobbies he'd once sneered at as childish. I rekindled friendships he'd discouraged because my friends didn't click with him. My life stopped orbiting around someone else's expectations, and I began to breathe again. 6 weeks after the breakup, word filtered back through mutual friends. Christopher was spinning tales, telling anyone who'd listen that I'd had a mental breakdown. Classic Christopher, rewriting history to preserve his ego. For a moment, I considered setting the record straight, but then I realized, let him talk. The people who mattered already knew the truth, and, to my surprise, those people showed up. Messages poured in, some from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. They told me they'd noticed the way he spoke to me. They'd been worried. One of his cousins even wrote, "I'm proud of you for walking away." Those words mattered more than any public defense ever could. Meanwhile, his texts dwindled in frequency but sharpened in manipulation. Just saw your favourite movie is back in theatres. Finally, tried that restaurant we always wanted to go to. Never an apology, never accountability, just breadcrumbs, meant to lead me back into the maze. I ignored every single one. It's been 3 months since that night. My apartment feels like home now. Work is going better than ever. Turns out I am ambitious when I'm not being told my job isn't enough. I've even dipped a toe back into dating. Nothing serious, just coffees and conversations, reminders that there are men out there who don't see a partner as a project to be corrected. Do I miss what we had? Sometimes. 4 years isn't something you erase with a snap. But when those memories tug at me, I remember his face the night he told me I wasn't worthy. That cold certainty. And then, I know, I made the right choice. So, here I am, 29, single, starting over. And for the first time in a long while, I'm not terrified of the unknown. I'm excited. I figured it was time to update you all. First, thank you, truly, for the flood of support after my last post. I read every single comment, even if I couldn't respond to them all. Your words carried me through nights that felt heavier than I could handle. So, where to begin? Let's start with Christopher. About a month after I last wrote, word reached me through the ever-efficient grapevine of mutual friends that he had someone new. Her name was Karen, and, according to everyone, she was everything I wasn't. Old money, a sharp corporate job in the city, polished, ambitious, and dressed like she'd walked straight out of a glossy magazine spread. Sarah ran into them once and described it like watching a movie couple in high definition. I won't lie, it stung. Badly. I thought I was past that point, but there's a special kind of pain in realising how fast someone can slot a new person into the space you thought you occupied for good. 4 years together, and within weeks he was parading a replacement. I spiralled for a weekend, scrolling through old photos, replaying our happiest days, whispering the cruel question, should I have tried harder? Should I have been more of what he wanted? But then, like a sharp slap, I remembered. You're not worthy of being my wife. The words he carved into me that night. That was the truth of how he saw me. And no amount of starving myself into his preferred dress size, no amount of reshaping my life would have made me worthy in his eyes. That was the moment therapy became more than a thought. Yes, I started going, and it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. My therapist looked me dead in the eye and said, love isn't about proving your value. It's about being seen as valuable without condition. I clung to that. The following Monday, determined not to sink into self-pity, I let Sarah drag me to dinner. Over wine, she mentioned her brother's upcoming birthday party and all but begged me to join. My first instinct was to decline, but after another glass, and maybe some gentle bullying, I agreed. That night changed everything. At the party, I met Donna. He was Sarah's brother's college best friend, in town for the celebration. At first we chatted in a group, casual, nothing remarkable. But somehow, hours later, I found myself on the porch swing beside him, the laughter from inside fading into background noise as we slipped into a conversation that felt startlingly easy. We talked about podcasts, fears, family, the little things that usually take months to uncover. There was no pressure, no manufactured flirting, just connection, steady and natural like breathing. I wasn't searching for a relationship. I was still savouring the independence I had fought so hard to reclaim. But when Donna asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. The next day, he texted, coffee before he left town. Coffee became lunch. Lunch bled into a walk in the park. The walk turned into dinner. We spent the entire day together, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that seen. Donna didn't comment on my clothes, my job, or my potential. He asked questions that proved he listened, really listened. He spoke about his family with unfiltered warmth. He seemed fascinated not by who I might become, but by who I already was. 40 minutes away doesn't count as long distance, but that's how it started. Weekends at his place, weekends at mine. There were awkward early mishaps, his Roomba screaming like a dying animal in the middle of a serious conversation, me nearly burning down his kitchen while trying to cook. Instead of snapping, we laughed until our stomachs hurt. Those little stumbles became inside jokes, not fractures. 3 months into dating Donna, it happened. I ran into Christopher and Karen at Target of all places. I dreaded that encounter for months. Sure, it would reopen wounds, send me spiraling with jealousy or humiliation. But when I saw them, something unexpected washed over me. Nothing. No anger, no envy, just calm acknowledgement, like glancing at an old photograph. We exchanged polite hellos, brief, clipped. Karen seemed uncomfortable, her eyes darting. Christopher looked startled, as though he couldn't fathom how composed I was. The whole thing lasted less than a minute, but to me it was monumental. I walked away, lighter, triumphant. Days later, the first text from Christopher in months appeared on my phone. Good to see you. And for the first time since the night he broke me, I laughed, not out of pain this time, but out of power. The text read, "You look well. Would love to catch up sometime, as friends." I showed it to Donna. He just raised his eyebrows, half amused, half indifferent. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked, no jealousy. No advice masters control, just space. And that was all I needed. I chose silence. Some doors, once slammed shut, should stay that way. Donna and I moved forward, step by step, but not hesitantly. 6 months into dating, he suggested I move in with him. "You're here most of the week anyway," he teased. His house, an old craftsman with stubborn windows and slanted floors, had more personality than any sleek apartment could. He'd been renovating it room by room, and I loved watching it transform under his hands. Leaving my tiny apartment, the refuge that had carried me through the storm, was scary. But it also felt right. Living together was an adjustment, as it always is. His shoes somehow lived permanently in the hallway. I had a bad habit of leaving cabinets open, like I expected invisible staff to finish for me. He liked the house chilly. I shivered under blankets. But instead of breeding tension, these quirks made us laugh. Where Christopher once picked apart every flaw, Donna just shrugged, kissed my forehead, and said, "Guess we balance each other out." Through Sarah, the small-town oracle, I heard Christopher and Karen were serious. He'd already taken her to meet his parents, something he and I hadn't done until 2 years in. Instead of jealousy, I felt something else. Pity. Did Karen already hear those tiny criticisms disguised as concern? Was she learning, piece by piece, that love with Christopher meant erasure? About a month after I moved in with Donna, the messages from Christopher started again, harmless on the surface. "How have you been? Heard you moved, hope all is well. Remember that band we saw? They're back in town." Breadcrumbs, nothing that screamed intrusion, but enough to unsettle. I didn't respond, or if I did, my replies were clipped and neutral. Donna knew about them. I didn't parade every text, but I didn't hide them either. They were too insignificant to threaten what we had. Until one day, he called. We were in the kitchen, cooking dinner, when my phone buzzed. Christopher's name glared on the screen. My stomach twisted. Donna glanced over, calm as ever. "You can answer if you want. Your call." I declined. Moments later, a voicemail. His voice oddly soft. "I'd like to meet. There are things I want to say in person. I debated for a night. Then I sent him a message. I'm happy in my relationship. I don't think meeting is a good idea. The reply came fast. I understand. I just wanted to apologize properly for how things ended. I said things I didn't mean. Too little, too late. But still, it was something. I thanked him and let it die there. Life with Donna settled into a rhythm that never felt routine. New restaurants, weekend road trips, game nights with friends, late-night conversations about the future, not as ultimatums, but as gentle what-ifs. 6 months after I moved in, he took me to the lake. Not the cursed lake where Christopher had proposed, but one far lovelier, quiet, wrapped in gold evening light. We picnicked, laughed, and then he simply said, I can't imagine my life without you. No speeches, no theatrics, just truth. He pulled out a ring, a vintage sapphire that had belonged to his grandmother. The moment I saw it, my throat closed. Tears blurred everything. I laughed. I cried. I said yes. That night, back on our porch with champagne in hand, my phone buzzed again. Christopher. Heard about your engagement. Didn't realize things were that serious. Hope you're not rushing into something you'll regret. I showed Donna. He shook his head, smirking. Some people never change. We decided on the cleanest response. None. At all. I blocked his number that night. Whatever game he was still trying to play, I was finished being a pawn. The next morning, Donna and I made it official. Facebook official, because in this world, nothing's real until it's online. The wave of love and congratulations was overwhelming. Friends, family, strangers from the edges of my circle. Among them, Sarah's comment stood out. From not worthy to fiancé. Look at you now. And for the first time in years, I felt it deep in my bones. Worthy, not because someone finally said so, but because I believed it myself. Worthy of the best man I know in less than a year. That's what I call an upgrade. That was Sarah's comment under our engagement post, and instead of feeling embarrassed that she dragged my past into the spotlight, I laughed. It was the perfect summary of my journey. Succinct, sharp, and true. We set the date 6 months out. No grand ballrooms, no endless guest lists, no debates over napkin shades or floral arrangements. Just a small ceremony, the people who mattered most, and a promise that this time it was about joy, not performance. The wedding is now only weeks away, and instead of anxiety or dread, I feel only certainty. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And the cherry on top? Through the ever-reliable small-town grapevine, I heard Karen dumped Christopher. Apparently, she reconnected with an old flame and realised she'd settled. The irony nearly made me choke on my coffee. From being told I wasn't worthy to finding someone who makes me feel treasured every single day, sometimes the ugliest endings really do clear the path for the brightest beginnings. Second update, 6 months later. It's been a whirlwind. Honestly, I wasn't planning to post again, but the latest twists are too outrageous not to share. When I last wrote, Donna and I were engaged. Wedding plans were in full swing. Planning this time felt like night and day compared to Christopher. With him, everything was about spectacle, about satisfying his parents and curating their approval. With Donna, it was simple. What would make us happy? Small, intimate, meaningful. Not once did anyone argue over whether my dress was sophisticated enough. Looking back, I can't believe I ever tolerated that nonsense. Then, 2 months before the wedding, Sarah dropped the kind of bombshell that only she could deliver with barely concealed delight. Karen, the flawless girlfriend, the one who was supposedly everything I wasn't, had been spending a lot of time with Sarah's brother Richard. They started as commuting buddies, then coffee companions, then more. Karen ended things with Christopher suddenly, and according to Sarah, he unravelled. Did I feel bad? Not even a little. Karma doesn't ask for permission before it arrives. And listening to Sarah describe how Christopher was now telling anyone who would listen that Karen had blindsided him, that he didn't deserve such cruelty, I couldn't help but smile. Sound familiar, Christopher? In the weeks before my wedding, the messages began again. I had blocked his number after the engagement, but he wriggled his way onto Instagram. At first, innocuous. Congratulations on the engagement. Again, how were the wedding plans coming along? Hope you're well. I ignored most, sent a polite thanks to one or two. But then the tone shifted. I've been thinking about us a lot. I realise now I made a huge mistake. I showed Donna. He just shook his head, calm, solid, unthreatened. The week before the wedding, the desperation peaked. Can we talk? Just for closure. I'd like to apologise in person. And the one that nearly made my blood boil. Are you sure you're making the right decision? The audacity. The gall of the man who once told me I wasn't good enough to question whether he was the one I should have chosen. That was the moment I stopped responding entirely. Our wedding day arrived, and it was perfect in its imperfection. Rain in the morning, supposedly good luck. My veil caught on a rose bush during photos. Donna's nephew announced very loudly that he needed to pee right in the middle of our vows. We laughed until our sides hurt. It was messy, real, joyful, everything Christopher's carefully orchestrated future never would have been. Of course, he tried to intrude. 3 calls during the ceremony itself. Sarah, my maid of honour and guardian angel, confiscated my phone and silenced them without a blink. When she told me afterward, we laughed until tears rolled down our cheeks. Imagine thinking your ex would answer your call on her wedding day. Afterward, Donna and I slipped away to a little seaside town, just 4 hours from home. A quiet honeymoon. No international flights, no Instagrammable resorts. Just the 2 of us, sand under our feet, salt air in our hair, and the intoxicating peace of a life that finally belonged to me. And Christopher? He's just a ghost now, pounding on a door that will never open again. Our honeymoon was simple, an Airbnb perched above the ocean, waves rolling beneath our window. We spent days wandering through small shops, eating too much seafood, watching sunsets with sand still clinging to our feet. It was the most relaxed I had felt in years. No judgment, no tension, no constant second-guessing of myself. Just us. Just peace. Coming home shattered that calm, at least for a moment. 17 missed calls. 177, to be exact. All from Christopher. My Instagram was clogged with messages. I need to talk to you. Then, please don't ignore me. And finally, I made a huge mistake letting you go. I showed Donna. He didn't bristle or rage. He simply looked concerned. Do you want me to talk to him? He asked, no pressure, no ego, just support. I hesitated, then nodded. The opportunity came quicker than expected. We were still unpacking when my phone rang again. Christopher. Without a flicker of doubt, Donna answered. Hello, Amanda's phone, he said cheerfully. There was a pause, then Christopher's voice tentative. Is Amanda available? She's a bit busy, Donna replied, cool as glass. Unpacking from our honeymoon. This is her husband, Donna. Is there something I can help you with? The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Christopher stammered something about wanting to congratulate us. Donna thanked him, polite but firm. We appreciate it, but Amanda has moved on completely. She'd prefer not to keep in contact. He hung up. No drama, no fireworks, just a boundary, clean and clear. I stared at him in awe. That is what a real partner looks like. Christopher hasn't called since. His final message was short. I understand now. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve to be happy. For me, it was the last page of a chapter I'd been trying to close for too long. Looking back, it's strange to remember how devastated I was when Christopher told me I wasn't worthy. At the time, it felt like my entire world was caving in. Now I see it for what it was, the beginning of something better. I'm not sharing this to gloat. I'm sharing it because I want anyone trapped in the fog of heartbreak to know this. Sometimes the moments that shatter you are the same ones that set you free. Donna and I are talking about buying a house now. Somewhere new, somewhere untouched by ghosts of past relationships. A place that's wholly ours. So here I am, 30 years old, married, building a new chapter with a man who doesn't question my worth. He celebrates it. Life isn't just good, it's right. Final update. 1 year later, I didn't think I'd ever write again, but life has a wicked sense of timing. Closure has a way of sneaking up on you. Donna and I have been married 15 months. 4 months ago, after endless searching, we found our first home. A 3-bedroom ranch from the 90s, with wallpaper crimes against humanity and a kitchen begging for renovation. But it has a sprawling backyard, perfect for the dog we're already arguing about, golden retriever or rescue mutt. It's ours, flaws and all. Home ownership has been chaos disguised as comedy. The dishwasher flooded the kitchen on day 2. 2 weeks later, squirrels revealed they'd been squatting in our attic. The bathroom sink occasionally gurgles at 3 a.m. like it's possessed. And yet, somehow, every mishap has been fun. Donna shoulders the heavy lifting. I organise the chaos. Together, we make it work. Last month, we decided to host a housewarming party. Just 20 or so friends and family on a Saturday afternoon. I scrubbed corners I didn't know existed, set out snack platters, pretended the half-painted hallway was intentional design. Sarah brought her legendary buffalo chicken dip. Donna's brothers set up new patio furniture. Laughter filled every room. Standing there, surrounded by people who loved us. Not for appearances, not for status, but for who we truly are, I felt the final trace of that old wound dissolve. Because this wasn't just a party. It was proof. Proof that I hadn't lost when Christopher told me I wasn't worthy. I'd won. I had built a life that was mine. A love that was steady. A home where laughter echoed louder than doubt. And at last, I didn't just feel worthy. I knew it. The house was buzzing, laughter spilling between the living room and backyard, friends balancing paper plates on their laps, the hum of easy conversation. I was in the kitchen refilling the ice bucket when Sarah walked in with that look. You know the one. Equal parts disbelief and dread. She leaned in. Don't freak out, but Christopher's outside. Yes, that Christopher, my ex, the man who once told me I wasn't worthy of him, at my housewarming party. Apparently, he'd appeared uninvited, bottle of wine in hand, looking slightly rumpled. Sarah had intercepted him in the driveway, but she couldn't exactly send him packing without raising eyebrows. My first reaction was a sharp spike of irritation. This was supposed to be our day, a celebration of the life Donna and I had built together. And Christopher thought he could just wander in. Typical. But then I caught myself. No nerves, no knot in my stomach. Just annoyance. That realization alone felt like victory. I told Sarah to let him in. Easier to diffuse it quietly than risk turning the party into a spectacle. Then I went to find Donna, who was proudly showing his dad the garage storage system he'd just installed. I explained, half expecting at least a flicker of possessiveness. Instead, Donna just raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do? Again, no jealousy, no posturing, just support. God, I love this man. We greeted Christopher together, civil but distant. He stood by the snack table, out of place, wine bottle clutched like a peace offering. Ironically, it was the same cheap label he used to mock me for buying, back when nothing I did was ever sophisticated enough. At first, the conversation limped along politely. He complimented the house, asked about the neighbourhood, commented on the weather, all while sneaking sidelong glances at Donna. I introduced him as an old friend, simpler than ex-fiancé who once gutted me with words I'll never forget. But then came the slip. One of Donna's cousins, oblivious, remarked how happy we seemed, how perfect we were together. Christopher muttered something under his breath, a bitter thread of words I barely caught. She wouldn't be here without me. I froze. What was that? And then the dam broke. He launched into this bizarre monologue about how he had prepared me for Donna, how his criticisms had pushed me to grow, how, really, I should be grateful for our breakup because it led me here. I was stunned into silence, fury and disbelief tangling in my chest. But before I could speak, Donna stepped in. His voice was calm, even. I'm grateful Amanda's in my life, he said evenly, but her growth came from her own strength, not from being torn down. And today's not the time for this conversation. We're here to celebrate. It was flawless, firm, respectful, final. Christopher didn't take the hint. Instead, he turned to me, eyes heavy with a warped kind of longing. Do you ever think about what could have been if I hadn't let you go? If he hadn't let me go, as though he hadn't told me I wasn't worthy, as though he hadn't ripped me apart with that single sentence, the arrogance of framing it as his choice, his favour. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I don't, because I'm too busy being grateful for what is. Breaking up was the best thing that ever happened, for both of us. Worthiness isn't something someone else decides for you. It's something you recognise in yourself. His face flickered. Surprise, confusion, maybe regret. For one heartbeat, I thought he might actually understand. But then he glanced around, at the friends laughing in our living room, at the home Donna and I had built, at the life he wasn't part of. Something hardened in his expression. You've changed, he muttered. You didn't used to be this cold. Before I could answer, Sarah swooped in with impeccable timing, her smile sharp as glass. Speaking of change, she said lightly, I actually ran into Karen and Richard last week. And just like that, the attention shifted, Christopher's presence shrinking under the weight of the life he no longer owned a piece of. Sarah, bless her, dropped the final bomb with the grace of a gossip queen. Oh, I ran into Karen and Richard at the farmers' market last weekend, she said, smiling sweetly. They're expecting their first baby this summer. Just bought a house across town. She passed her phone around, showing us a photo. Karen, radiant, hand on her belly, Richard grinning beside her. They looked happy, genuinely, simply happy. I watched Christopher's face as the news sank in. He blinked like he was trying to solve a complicated math problem, as if happiness without him was an equation he'd never considered. And then Sarah, with casual cruelty only she could pull off, added, Karen said being with you was a learning experience. Ouch. For a second, I thought he might combust right there in the middle of our backyard. Instead, he tipped back the rest of his drink in one long swallow, muttered something about another commitment, and stumbled toward the door. Donna, ever the gentleman, walked him out. I stayed with Sarah, both of us avoiding eye contact, our shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter until we heard the door click shut. When Donna came back, he was grinning. You'll love this, he said. On the way out, Christopher asked me, man to man, if you were always this stubborn. I raised an eyebrow. And what did you say? Donna's smile widened. told him I prefer the term self-assured. Then I suggested he call an Uber, since he'd clearly had more than a few. The party rolled on without further drama, though I noticed a few curious glances and heard the low buzz of whispered speculation. Small town gossip. This would be fuel for weeks. The next morning, my phone buzzed with one final message. Christopher. I'm sorry for yesterday. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I hope you're happy. Simple. Ambiguous. But probably the closest thing to closure I'll ever get from him. I didn't reply. Some conversations are better left unfinished. So that's it, Reddit. My story closed at last. Life isn't perfect. Our roof needs replacing sooner than expected. Donna and I bicker about whose turn it is to take out the trash. And yes, I still wrestle with the echoes of insecurity that Christopher planted in me. Wounds don't vanish overnight. But here's what I've learned. Worthiness is not something handed to you by someone else, nor something you earn by reshaping yourself into their mold. Worthiness is recognizing your own value and surrounding yourself with people who never questioned it in the first place. Your advice, your encouragement, your kind words, you carried me through my darkest days. For that, I'll always be grateful. I won't be posting updates anymore, for real this time, but I'll still be around in the comments if anyone has questions. From not worthy to building a life that feels exactly right. That's the ending I never saw coming. And honestly, it's the only one that matters,